comes to fantasies, it's not about fulfilling your fantasies, it's about talking about your fantasies, right? And so talking means getting into your meaning, your why and your why not. You don't have to have the same fantasies as a partner, but if you're willing to talk about, okay, why does the idea of, for example, a threesome appeal to me? Because the variety of responses when it comes to why is quite wide-ranging, right? So somebody might like a threesome because they want all the attention on them. Others say they want a threesome because they like the power of knowing they can get two people. Other people want a threesome for the simple physiological overwhelm of having all those fingers and hands and toes all over them. Other people may not want threesomes because I'm like, that is a lot of toes in the room. I feel 20 toes is already enough toes. 10 more toes creeping up toward me, that's a lot. And so if I want to have a threesome and Brandon doesn't want to have a threesome, that's fine if we can talk about our why, right? Because so if I can say, actually, what appeals to me about a threesome is that I want to feel like I'm kind of good enough to get two people. Well, if he can understand my why, then he can kind of play with that in talk with me, right? There's a lot we can do with that. Now, if he says, I don't want to have a threesome, no way, no how, end of conversation, it's hard to have a rich discussion. So as much as I want to get into my why, I'm hopeful that he'll also get into his why not, and we'll get to those vulnerable feelings. So he might say, like, you know, I like the idea of it, but here's a super common one for hetero folks like him, but I only want another girl, right? And then we can get into, well, why, right? Is it latent homophobia, or is it that there's a fear that if I'm with a man, I might like him more? And if he knows me, he knows that's not true. One penis is enough penis for the world. But it might be that he feels like, you know what, that doesn't align with my sexual values, right? So then I can better understand his no. Same thing for sex clubs. Has anyone ever been to a sex club? All right. I like that smile. I bring up sex clubs because I think it's a super important conversation, and for me it was very life-changing to be around real live people with real bodies having sex that they actually wanted to be having, right? So not performative. Sure, there can be an element of exhibitionism, of course. Apparently Brandon's into that. But also, they're not being told to open their right breast to camera too, right? There's no Super Soaker 2000 in there squirting across the room unless that's something that, you know, is an anatomical anomaly and healthy for them. And so talking about fantasies and sex clubs is one way to just open a conversation that feels a little bit vulnerable, but with no pressure, right? So it's not that I'm saying, please don't go home and say, Dr. Jess said we need to go to a sex club. That's not what I'm saying, but I think the conversation around the opportunity to see real live sex, life-changing. My first time, I think, was 2006 at that same Desire Resorts, and at the time, I was doing my doctorate, and I was studying and reading and engaging with the material and looking into the data, and that doesn't compare to actually seeing people do it. Especially mostly people in their 50s who didn't look like me, right? I was younger, and I was just, as I said, learning. And even illustrations, when we look at anatomy, they're not accurate. They're not representative. They're not representative of all ages. They're absolutely not representative of all skin tones and races and all the variation. So the capacity to have the opportunity to get to be around real-life sex is just, for me, it's magical. And our next one, Brandon, I don't know if you know, we have to go on a couples cruise. Have to. My job sucks. From Barcelona to Rome, I think next month. And it's a place where you have the option to be naked, and there's also a playroom, and you don't have to engage with it, but if you want to go in the playroom, you have real life sex. So lots of fodder to talk about with the fantasies. I got to wrap this up. Those are our 3 Fs. And then, if we're going to talk about the 3 Fs and sexual values, we also want to be talking about the boundaries, the rules of the relationship, monogamy, right? So do you want to be monogamous? Do you want to be ethically non-monogamous? Again, we have lots of data showing that people's definition of monogamy varies from person to person, from culture to culture, from identity class to identity category, right? And so we need to talk about what does monogamy mean to me, but also why? Why do I want monogamy? Or why do I want ethical non-monogamy, right? So when we talk about monogamy, we're asking, what are the benefits we expect to derive from monogamy? What are the benefits we expect to derive from ethical non-monogamy? The type of relationship arrangement you choose, whether it be monogamous or ethically non-monogamous, does not determine the outcome of your relationship. So one more time, outcomes from relationships like commitment, trust, companionship, love, passion, do not vary significantly between relationships that are monogamous versus ethically non-monogamous. But we tend to expect that what we've chosen for ourselves is the ultimate, is the right way, is the righteous way. And we validate our own choices by projecting those needs onto others. But I think everyone should be having this conversation around monogamy. And another really important piece, too, is that we know that monogamous relationships aren't necessarily monogamous, right? So we have a infidelity rate of around 24% if we look at meta-analyses across North America. We know that we intend to be monogamous, but don't always follow through. And the more we talk about it and the more we talk about the contingencies, the more I think we can safeguard our relationships however we decide to plan them. In Canada, in fact, 12% of Canadians rate open relationships, not my language, but the language of the study, as their ideal relationship format. In the United States, 1 in 5, so 20% of daters, have engaged in ethical non-monogamy. So it's more common than we think, and it's definitely absolutely in this room, even if people aren't talking about it. I started in this field. I hosted a show for Playboy TV called Swing, and it was 3 people. It was about swingers, and they were all living in this mansion. 1 year we were in LA, and other years we were in Vegas. And every weekend I'd bring in a new couple who thought they might want to try swinging. And at the time, it was really edgy and really revolutionary. But now, almost not a day goes by that someone doesn't come up and say, hey, I watched Swing, and that opened conversations for us, and now we're practicing some form of ethical non-monogamy along a spectrum, of course, right? So it's not open as a bit of an exaggerated word because there's this spectrum or maybe a web of how it exists. Now, in terms of the most important conversation that I see with my clients and the thing that they struggle with most, and I'm going to move through it because I'm running out of time and you want to eat, this is quality time. The thing that my clients fight about most is how they spend their time. And this is because they're busy. This is because we tend to move through the world a little bit mindlessly. But what's important with time is not that we figure out how to divide it, but again, that we talk about the meaning we attach to it, right? So if you're calling in, you were supposed to go to dinner and you have to work late, can you talk about how that makes you feel, right? So if Brandon calls and says, I have to cancel dinner, actually I'm working late tonight, I might tell myself the story, well, clearly Brandon values work over me. Or I might tell myself the story, oh man, that must be hard for him. I know he was really looking forward to being with me, but he's stuck at work, which isn't nearly as fun as me, right? But if we can talk about what quality time means, because to some people, quality time is holding hands, looking in the eye, feeling each other's aura and energy. For other people, quality time is just the quiet comfort of a dog in the room, but that dog is your partner or another loved one, right? Like just knowing that he's on the couch next to me scrolling on our phones can feel like quality time, but we need to define what it is. I had some clients the other day who they used this exercise, but they also created a whiteboard. So I love a whiteboard, where they wrote down all the ways that they spend their time, and then they checked, color-coded for each partner, where they wanted to spend more time. And so then they were able to facilitate a conversation around, okay, so I actually want more time alone apart, and you want more time alone together without friends, and you can keep that conversation going from there. So sometimes it has to be a little bit formal. And if time is the number one issue that clients fight about, the trending issue is technology and technoference. So we have new data coming out around how the mere presence of these little phones with us detracts from connection, from trust, from collaboration, even from attraction, right? And whether the phone is out of the room, on the table, or in your pocket, with each layer of accessibility, it detracts from the connection that we're looking for. Now, how many of you take your phones into the bedroom at night? Okay, don't be shy, no shame. How many of you do that because it's your alarm clock? Right, how many of you can afford an alarm clock? We're gonna start saving for the alarm clocks. Next year, that's gonna be our goodie bag. No more vibrators, right? It's gonna be the alarm clock. So I just want you to think a little bit about one change you can make to the way we use technology on a daily basis so that maybe you can make one tiny shift. Like how many of you would be willing to never take your phones in the bedroom again? Now that's more than usual. This is great. How many of you would be willing to maybe just tonight keep your phones out of the bedroom? right? So if we can start with one night, because again, we want to think about the messaging. If I'm sitting there scrolling and Brandon's sitting next to me, he might think, oh, whatever she's looking at must be very appealing, very alluring, more interesting, more enticing at this moment in time. So we just want to think about, do we wake up to the phone, do we go to bed to the phone, or do we wake up and go to bed to a loved one? And then I'll just quickly ask this as well. How many of you will sit on your phone, partner's on their phone, you put your phone down, and then you say, why are you on your phone? All right, I'm working on that, Brandon. Bill me, everyone.